welcome back to It's Only a Best Before Day. So this is a podcast where we're talking about coding, marking, packaging, traceability. As always, I'm joined by Lee. Hi, Lee. How's
Good
things?
morning.
How's your
Well,
first
hello,
week been after
Gary.
the podcast?
It's great to be back again, isn't it? Number two. What is it? We've got to get to 40, isn't it? Something like that before we
I think
become
we, I think we'd
a
like to get
formal
to 40.
podcast series.
We survived episode 1. I think there's been some real good feedback, actually. I ran a lot of analytics on it as well. So I don't know if you've had any feedback, Lee, but I've had quite a few people contacting me and congratulating us on a great duo for this podcast.
Isn't that great news?
But it's been
We
good.
weren't sure.
No, I've ran some analytics. There's been over 100 downloads on Spotify.
That's great, isn't it?
That's not good for a first podcast, by the way.
Mm-hmm. And that's good considering it's only one of the platforms. So
exactly, yes. For people that are watching, you might see another individual on this podcast, a very good-looking gentleman there called Steve Keddie. Steve, thank you for joining us. It's a real pleasure. So Steve is a senior director. Is that what I describe you as, Steve, at GS1?
That's what happens when you get grey hairs. You get a senior title. So
we're all getting there. So Steve, give us an introduction. Thank you for joining us. Tell us all about yourself.
Sure. So as you heard, Steve Keddie, I am now the Senior Director for GS1's Solution Provider Global Ecosystem. So within GS1, I'm now in my third job. So maybe a quick thing around who is GS1, because I'm not sure I've ever gotten anyone to offer me a beer just because I've said I'm from GS1 that far. So anyways, GS1 is mostly known as a global standards organization, but really the background behind it is you have, it's a community and it's community driven. And that community comes to GS1 to build standards to make their lives more efficient. And as part of that process, we are a neutral, not-for-profit organization that allows us to have that platform where industry can come and talk, and we're not looking at them as what's the profit margin. It's really about how can we help you. And really, the conversation and what we're going to be talking about really came from industry initially. So it's a nice way to bring the two pieces together. So that's who I am, and why I'm now at GS1.
You're not an unknown to me and Lee. I've known you a long time, Steve, because obviously we worked together at Malcolm and Marsh. I don't mind saying that. Lee, you've had a lot of interaction and
I don't know how long I've known Steve. It's been so long that I've forgotten the start of it. But it's measured in units of 10 years rather than units of years. So it's been a good while now.
Mm-hmm. So Steve, I don't know whether you watched the first episode. Lee, do you just want to give somebody a bit of background of what episode 1 was for those that haven't listened, the naughty people?
Well, episode 1. In fact, that the whole purpose behind the podcast is there's an awful lot of noise at the moment about changes in coding and marking and changes in barcoding. And there's lots of different people promoting different ideas, which are all of which are perfectly valid, but the whole picture starts to look quite complicated. So what we started off here was trying to come up with a kind of a simple guide, a simple discussion format to help do myth busting and help people understand what they have to do to make these changes and what those decisions really mean in simple terms. And the purpose behind this podcast is to try and simplify and get people to understand what they've got to do and how we can help them move forward in that process. So episode 1, we touched on 2D coding quite a bit and what's going on with Sunrise. And it's brilliant that Steve's able to join us for series 2 to explain further about those points and how we got to where we are and what a significant change this is in the long term for the coding and marking and general manufacturing industries.
So me and Lee, we gave our view last week, and right or wrong, people might be listening to it and thinking you two are just talking complete rubbish. But I think we've got a good background to give a good balanced view of it. But that was our opinion. And like I say, it's great to have you on where you can join the dots. You can tell us what we've said wrong or what's a misinterpretation. So give us your explanation and understanding of what Sunrise 2027 is from your perspective and from a wider perspective.
Sure. And as I said a little earlier, everything that GS1 does is industry driven. So back in 2018, a few of the retailers started initially putting 2Ds, GS1 data matrices on products. And we're really saying, hey, we need to make a change to enable 2D barcodes at point of sale, because at that point they were just doing it, and they said, well, we can see the advantage and it's really helping us. And so from that, I gathered a bunch of information with a good friend, Elena Tivanovic, and we put together a presentation called 2D or Not 2D, and we gave it to the GS1 community, and from that things spun up. We did what's called a future compact coding project, where industry came together and we talked about it, and out of that we all agreed to make a few changes, and one of them was really around the overall migration to 2D, and we agreed that the first place we're going to start is retail.
So Steve, just let me jump in 1 second.
Yeah.
Obviously, you're talking about 2D, which is 2D and QR barcodes. And people that are from the industry will have known, particularly 2D came from pharmaceutical and automotive aerospace. What was the main driver moving into that type of 2D barcode? And we know that QR initially was more of a marketing barcode. So from your perspective, why has it gone from a 1D to the 2D?
It's kind of like that transition between analog and digital. So, the ENUPC started 50 years ago. Think of that as the land of analog scanning and being able to pick up a very small amount of data. And that small amount of data only identified the product, right? Didn't tell anything about the product. It was useful in the supply chain to identify a product. You don't know differences between one product to the next product, and you can use it for price lookup and basic inventory. But when you move to a 2D barcode, now you have a lot more, I'll call it again, digital content. So now you can have the best before date, you can have the lot, you can have other pieces of information. And that then really unlocked countless use cases for the retailer. But as you noted there, QR code also became very, very prevalent. And our phones can naturally scan a QR code that has a web URI in it and take you someplace. And so the two of those things all came together about at the same time, where you had the cameras had just have gotten good enough. There was a real drive to have that more information. You had retailers that were leveraging it and showing that there's big advantages to it. So all of that sort of came together, and industry went, yeah, it's time, because we actually need this more granular data, because it's not only the fact that retailers can use it, but they also saw on the horizon all kinds of regulations, and how are they going to meet these regulations with only one piece of data that is the name of the product, when they have to, for example, say where that product came from, right? And those sort of things as part of the process.
So who got particularly excited about it? So we're talking about retail.
Mm-hmm.
Who were the people that got really excited about it? Were this mainly from a marketing perspective, or was it supply chain, or what? Lee, I don't know what your view is.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's interesting. I read a post on LinkedIn this morning, which was an interview with the guy that had created the QR code at Denso, and I won't attempt to pronounce his name, because that would be probably impolite.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason they did it was that they wanted a better barcode that could store more data. And I think for me, the interesting thing about this kind of whole 1D, 2D thing is it's not one piece of technology coming together that's enabled this. It's a combination of things that's made it possible. And with all these things, people come up with clever bits of technology all the time. But what you've got here is you've got an initiative that joins up a combination of barcodes that can take more data, thanks to Denso. You've got retailers who are wanting to use and are able to use more data. You've got web linkages, and you've got smartphones. And all these things come together to what GS1's created. That's my feeling anyway. And the difficulty with that is when you're trying to combine 3 or 4 different changes at once, how do you make it easy for people to understand? Because actually putting it all together, it's not very difficult. It just looks difficult from a distance.
Yeah, if I add in, so thinking back to that early phase, what was decided by the mission specific work group is to actually bring forward 3 barcodes. And the reason they had those thoughts is that the GS1 data matrix, as Gary rightly said, was being used in healthcare since 2014, really successful, and it's been really focused on, if you will, a B2B, so business to business. So if a patient scanned it, it really didn't do anything unless they had a specific app that then helped them get to the additional information. And of course, QR code, because Denso Wave very smartly worked with the the phone manufacturers to enable the ability of the phone camera to naturally be able to scan and serve up a QR code's web address where a consumer can then click on it. So that was a brilliant move by them, because it could have happened in a data matrix as well. But QR code, quick response code, they did a great job and really made them the dominant solution. But you're right, the one that is absolutely dominant is, and will be dominant, will be the QR code, and as we like to say, powered by GS1 because of the syntax. So,
you've actually taught me something completely new. Every day's a school day. People that know me always say that. Quick response. Is that what QR stands for?
that's what QR stands for, yeah, quick response. Yeah.
Every day is a school day.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because Denso effectively gave it away.
Yeah.
So they developed this technology. They realized it had lots of potential. They also realized that it would only really get going if they let other people use it. So they published the spec, that other people used it, and that's why it's got to the situation it's in. And I think from the point of view of those of us in the AIDC industry, the fact that it's supported by Apple and Android has been a really big factor, because what that means is that not only can you theoretically read it with a smartphone, but you can actually read it with a smartphone. And you can get your phone out, and that can take you to new sources of data. And that's really important, because if people have got access to more information, then other people can then build applications on the back of it. So I think it's opening the doors to lots of new applications, but we have to get past that first stage of getting these codes on the packs at retailers and getting people buying products using them, and then everything else can happen.
So, Steve, it sounds as though you've been on a long journey with this, and speaking to a number of different parts of the industries and sectors. Who created Sunrise 2027, and what does it mean?
Oh yeah, so the data point of Sunrise 2027 actually came from industry. So basically, GS1 went ahead and did a huge survey and brought in a few people that do the big surveys of industry, and found out where point of sale is. Again, we're focusing in on point of sale, where point of sale was in terms of its capability of scanning a 2D barcode, and when would the scanners that are in the retail environment all be imaging, or be, let's say 90% imaging. And so, trend lines were predicted and all that sort of stuff. And everything said that 2027 is when we'll be there. And so we brought that back and to the industry, and industry came together and said, yeah, let's do that. But let's at least make it the end of 2027, because it's pretty ambitious, right? Think about the world and how many scanners there are, and also that you have different countries that are in different phases of their technology learning curves and what they have, right? Some places in Africa might be ahead of us because they didn't have the laser scanners and stuff like that. They'll just be using their phone, right? And whereas maybe places like the US, even though it's super technology advantaged, they've got a long history of barcode scanners and things like that. So there's all those interesting plays that are part. And so that's why, Sunrise 27 is if you will, not an end date, but our goal of when we'll have a place that will be able to do that. But one more thing before you add in, what Sunrise 2027 is to, we get there, retail can scan 2D barcodes, and the idea is that then the brands that have adopted it and are now putting it on their products, and it's being scanned at point of sale, then they have the option of removing the ENUPC barcode. And so that's one of the real estate wins that the brands will have when we get there.
You've touched on something what I'm quite interested in. There seems to be a big drive, particularly in the UK, for this. You've obviously mentioned all parts of the world.
Yeah.
Who is, what countries are driving this first and foremost? Is it the UK? Is it Australia? Is it Asia? Is it US? Where?
It's pockets all over the world. So if I go back to the first driver, it was actually in Germany, in Metro. Metro in 2016 did the first GS1 data matrix implementation, and of course you can't scan that with your phone, but they basically proved some amazing capabilities. They really focused in on meats and proteins like fish and things like that for the use of a GS1 data matrix. So it looks like a QR code, but again, it's not designed to be scanned directly from the phone. And they wanted to put the expiry date in there and a little bit more traceability information. And so with that, they were able to now be able to stop at the point of sale anything that is about to expire or is past its best before date. Ergo, the name of the show. And in addition to that, they unlock all kinds of wonderful things with their app. So, for example, with scanning that data matrix, they were able to see where the fish was caught, see how the fish was caught, because remember, in that time frame, there's this big thing about gill nets and all the kinds of things that could be being used for fishing and environmentally unfriendly. So you could see how the fish was caught. You could see where it was processed. Was it processed on the ship? Was it maybe you get a nice picture of the factory that it was processed in, and then once it got into the store, you were able to recognize by scanning it what the best before date was on it immediately. But what that also gave to Metro was the ability to recognize that they're getting close to the best buy date, right? And so then what they would do is they would actually proactively reach out to the professional buyers to say, hey, we've got all this salmon that's getting close. If you come in, scan your QR code saying it's who you are, we'll give you a discount for this salmon. And what does that mean to us? Well, that means that we get a salmon special when we go to the restaurant. So these are they were the first ones. But then it expanded out quickly from there. The next move was Belgium, Luxembourg, with Colroy and that group. And then that they taught Australia. Australia's Woolworths, one of the biggest implementations in the world. They went big. And the great thing about what Woolworths did is they shared broadly how awesome this is, right? And with them sharing broadly, at the same time, China took off. And now China has over 100,000 products being scanned by point of sale that have QR codes with GS1 Digital Link. So they're the biggest implementation. That country is moving. And so you got this momentum growing. You have you had Brazil kick in. Brazil was literally the first one to scan a QR code at point of sale, very first one. And then it was just, a lot of these people I've been talking is like really big retailers. Well, that was a little itty bitty retailer that sells bread. Wait, isn't that what we had as the example? Yeah,
We've got a loaf of bread.
They're a bakery. They're a bakery, and they were the first ones to sell a QR code. And now the new driver is Tesco, and so Tesco is Tesco. Each retailer pushes a little harder because each retailer is seeing, wow, this is really great, and how it can really improve things. And we have the Nordics all going to town, and so all these pieces of the world.
So just to jump on that, it's brilliant. Again, I've learned something new again with all those countries that have adopted it. Just being simple-minded.
Mm-hmm.
Sunrise 2027, as you've just alluded to, is very much being driven by Tesco's in the UK. What's the digital passport? Is that a similar thing in Europe? You've mentioned Nordics and people like that, but is that a very similar thing, or is it something different?
Yeah, so the digital product passport. So let's just lump it into regulations. So for years, the regulations have been fairly, non-existent. There's some regulations that have been that are related to the retail supply chain, but now that's changing. And so you have things like the digital product passport. You have and that digital product passport. We all know about the EU version of it because it's the one that's in the news the most for the European Union. But there's digital product passports in Asia and other countries. So, and they require the consumer, the person that's buying the product, to be able to see the digital version of that product and understand where it came from and make choices based on that digital product passport before they buy it. So they have to have a way of being able to scan it and get that information. Go ahead.
So that's more consumer driven. Is that right?
It's consumer driven, but by regulations for sustainability, all about sustainability.
Well, I think the interesting thing with all of these is that, for example, the idea of discounting products as they get close to their expiry date is not new. Mm-hmm. I sat through a startup presentation probably in 2010 from a company doing this. It didn't work. And why didn't it not work? Because it meant the first thing you've got to do is get every retailer to add an extra barcode to all their products. Mm-hmm. So they could demonstrate the consumer side. They could say, "Hey, look, this really works. You can have these displays which say, if it's the last day, it's 25% off." Mm-hmm. You can have all of that kind of stuff, but they had to relabel everything. Had to add an extra label on, and of course, that just makes the whole thing unaffordable from a retailer point of view. This change that GS1 is making is really making the product and the data about the product joined together by that barcode, and then what you do with it later, well, that's down to the imagination of people in the future.
As Lee said, once you now have that identification portion inside that data carry, now you can go to a landing page, and you can then click on what's the digital product passport, what's the allergens, what's the certifications, and of course the marketing part of it, or what's a nice wine pairing. All these things are possible.
Or which bin to put it in.
Is this really?
Exactly.
Is it promoting? We'll get onto the myths. Me and Liv spoke about myths on this topic last week. But interestingly, I was talking to my friend's mother yesterday, and she was asking about the podcast, unbelievably.
Mhm.
And I told her what it's all about. She goes, does that mean I've got to scan every product that I buy? She goes, Gary, I can't even use a phone. So what does, from somebody that's not conversant with technology, does this really matter from a consumer perspective?
And so it's like the simple part in terms of two places you can scan it, obviously. There's the scanning point in the supply chain, and there's a scanning point for the consumer. And so that consumer, again, has two places. They can scan it with their phone, right? And that makes life really easy because if you can turn your camera on, you can scan a QR code, and that QR code that phone will serve up the link that takes you to that information. The QR code will be next to the E and UPC barcode that you've always scanned. The consumer won't even notice the difference. All they're doing is scanning the product.
I think it's a perfect point to jump onto this myth busting, what Lee alluded to earlier. Here's one thing. So we spoke about it earlier. Sunrise 2027. Does that mean that the traditional barcode will just disappear overnight in 2027?
No, absolutely not. So the idea is it's a transition. There will be manufacturers in the world that don't really see an advantage of making a change. For example, in fact, this was a funny one because I always used to say, well, sock manufacturers, why would they want to do it? Blah, blah, blah. And then literally this week, a sock manufacturer is asking me about adding a QR code to a product. So it's like, well, there you go. I was wrong. So there'll be places where maybe the product, like think about on the side of a pencil, right? So that's going to be really hard for a 2D barcode to live. So that may always be a linear barcode, or they'll have a pack of them, and the 2D barcode will be on the packaging. But it's not a sunset in any sense of the imagination. The linear barcode, we still love it. When it came into existence in retail, it's over 50 years old now. So we respect our elders, and we want to. We're not going to be sunsetting that anytime soon. But again, the reason behind 2027 is our hope is that we have regions or areas of the world that have gotten to that point where that it allows the brands to start dropping off the products. Some retailers, because they control their own supply chain, they just got rid of it altogether. So they only have a 2D barcode on a lot of their fresh products now because it's all controlled within the store, within their own supply chain.
So is there going to be a deadline? Because we've spoken about this previously, but this is more than just a QR code. It's packaging changes. It's the printing equipment ready for it. Obviously the packaging, that's the artwork, all the production line validation. Having the Sunrise 2027, is this making some manufacturers panic and think, I need to have this by the end of 2027?
Sure. I think that's some are panicking, but there's no need to. Again, the idea is it's not, you don't have to put the 2D on there if you don't want to, because it'll always run. But this is one of, and Lee again talked about this, and you've hit on it before. This is one of those rare situations where it's a win-win and win situation, right? So once for the retailer, we've talked about it a lot, the automatic price markdown capabilities and all the things it unlocks for the retailer. So the retailers are like, let's do this. Even though they understand that their scanners may need software updates, or they'll have to replace the really old ones. They understand that what has to get done. But on the manufacturer side, it also unlocks all kinds of wonderful things for them. Now I can be really, really sure that I'm doing not first in, first out, but first expired, first out. So now I can really be sure that I'm controlling my inventory really, really well and sending it out. So that's a big advantage right away. Go ahead, sorry. Gary.
I just want to throw in something. Obviously, with the QR code, is it fixed information? Because we're talking about best before dates.
Hmm.
Is it dynamic information that QR code has to change all the time when it's being printed? So this is going on to, and we'll talk about this in future episodes.
Yeah.
The hardware side of things is a huge topic, because printing a QR code dynamically is a big change, in my view. I don't know what you think, Lee.
Absolutely. I'll go for it, Lee.
I wasn't actually going to say anything, but seeing as you asked, it's.
I can
think
always
that's
tell by
one of
your
the-
facial
for me,
expressions, Lee.
I think that's one of the things we need to talk about in a specific episode about why. Because what I think you're seeing is there are certain types of products where dynamic data is really important.
Mhm.
So I'm thinking here drugs. That's been the case since, well, I remember doing animal drugs in 2004 and human drugs, kind of 2014, Steve said, that kind of period, it's normal. And other products, often where there's duty associated with it, you get government regulations wanting tight control to make sure that the government gets its cut.
Yeah.
Did I say that? Yeah, I think I did. But then you start moving into, where will the supermarkets get big advantages? They'll get big advantages in things that have got a real risk of going out of date. So all the proteins, all the dairies, all the vegetables, these are all the ready meals. These are all things where good inventory management will make it work really well. Where else? Well, places where you might have a recall, anything that's kind of got a safety angle to it. All of these are reasons why you might want to have variable data printed online. But there's plenty of other products where, honestly, it's not quite so useful. It's not, if you could deliver it for nothing, or you're building a new line and you can put it in from day one, yeah, absolutely, that will work. If you want more consumer interaction, it'll have a benefit, but it's a completely different business case. So I think, for me, I think it's going to turn out to be, we're going to see certain areas of the supermarket change, and we'll see other bits that won't. Yeah, and it's just a question of working out which ones move. But for the ones that don't move to variable QR, they still get benefits by moving to fixed QR as part of the artwork. So you'll see an artwork change and somebody will introduce it, and another artwork change and someone will introduce it, because there's nearly no cost when you do an artwork change anyway.
Yeah.
So I want to come back to the manufacturers, though, because that's a good point you've raised there, Lee. Where do they actually start? Because there's, me and you have obviously experienced a lot of food producers, particularly in the UK, that have made these changes to support the QR change. But for those that haven't, where do they start? Because we've spoken about, obviously, is it dynamic? Is it static QR code? How's it going to affect the packaging? And Steve, from your perspective, and I'm sure obviously you've worked with some manufacturers on this, where do they start?
It's really important to first start with what's the use case you're trying to solve. So someone's come up with an idea. I need to be able to have more data in the barcode, and I need to solve this use case. And then that's kind of the start of it. But the interesting thing about the QR code with the digital ink syntax in it, because it's URI, there's a lot of people that need to be involved, right? Where is this going to be printed? Like Lee was saying, is it going to be on the line, in line, or is it going to be upstream, happening at the converter where that packaging is being created? And who needs to be involved? The most important and probably one of the biggest mistakes that happen is not having all of the stakeholders around the table to have that conversation. And once you've had that conversation, the next part of it is, all right, so you want, what that will do is that, hey, I want that use case, I want that use case, all these people come together saying, hey, this is great. I can get that information in the barcode. Let's do something. Now, the real key is, how do I minimize the amount of data I put in so I keep the QR code nice and small and easy scannable? And so that's all part of the learning. And then from there,
But what does that mean for somebody that's not implemented it? Are you saying, right, I know what's involved. There's obviously the printing side, there's the packaging side, there's the validation side, and there's the data collection as such. So there's some kind of software system. Are you saying, obviously, don't try and do all these things at once? Try and do one of these steps to make this implementation a lot easier. Is that
Yeah,
fair?
I think you have, yes, trying to do as little impact as possible on the first go. When you move to the line, again, you've had all those stakeholders together. And so those stakeholders have say, hey, I want to be able to capture the fact that I've put the right expiry date or right best before date or right lot date in that QR code, right? So what does that mean? That means that your ERP system or the systems that you have to control your process need to, check and validate. So I know that I put the barcode in there. I know that I printed the QR code. Did it get printed well? So do I have a camera that checks it? Do I have verification processes? So all those little things you have to learn as part of the steps to really feel confident and have a well-run line. Is my line, because today I print text to say the best before date, and now I want to print it in a 2D barcode. It's got new constraints.
But you're still going to have the QR and the human readable information.
Yeah, you'll still have human readable information. And if it's standing by itself, then you need to have the same GTIN, the same numbers that you used to have under the ENUPC underneath there, because if everything else fails, you need to be able to type in the numbers. Right?
You've spoken about a number of people just getting involved in this. Who are we? And again, we spoke about it previously. Who are the people? Are you talking marketing people, quality, engineering, production? Who? Is it all of them?
And external stakeholders, right? And you want to bring in the solution providers that are part that support you. Like you're going to want to bring in the company that does your supplier of the printers. You're going to want to bring in your camera guy. You're going to want to bring those guys in because you want their expertise, because you're now moving to a different way of putting something on your product. Right.
And that's going to be something we'll discuss in future, because it doesn't matter who the manufacturer is, and we know all the major players in this field. They're always going to say this is the best technology for me. So that's a wider sort of topic that Lee will talk about. But it's great that you've mentioned that, to really understand who are the stakeholders in this whole decision-making process.
Yeah. And who's going to help you get there, right?
Yeah.
Gary and Lee are going to help you get there, basically.
I think one of the difficulties is that there's going to be somebody driving it. Most of the drive in the UK at the moment is coming from Tesco's. In other countries, it's whichever retailer happens to be the person pushing it. They're only driving their use case. They're driving what they want out of it. And one of I was talking to a manufacturer a couple of weeks ago, and they said, we're being driven by Tesco's. That's why we're doing it. We're looking for the reasons that we would benefit as well. So what are we going to get out of it? And my response to that would be normally, well, you're going to get much better traceability through your shop floor. And if I go right the way back to my manufacturing days, traceability on the shop floor was really key to driving efficiency. The more you knew where your rejects were coming from, the more you knew where your problems were coming from, the more you were able to improve your efficiency. And I think that's one of the things that people will get out of this. So they may not know that they've had a problem till after it's been sold, but they will then be able to get back much more quickly to where that came from. And I think that's going to be one of the key questions. And I think, to be honest, that area needs more exploring, because at the moment, a lot of manufacturers see it quite negatively.
Yeah.
But actually, in the end, it should be a lot more positive, particularly when you start adding in the scanning data that you're going to get from it. You're going to start to know what it is people are interested in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this year has been a big uptick in brands implement, big uptick. And for the brands that are adopting, they're looking at it as a win, right? Because of what you're saying there in terms of the ability to do traceability, but they're also looking at it to control the story So with these regulations coming in, a lot of the regulators, they fall in love with their own QR code. And so if the brand is already ahead of it, has a QR code that can meet the regulations, they can tell the regulator, we understand that you love your QR code, but we have a way of doing this, and this is how we're going to do it as an industry. And so that's very, very powerful, because otherwise, especially the big brands, because they're in the room with the regulators, understanding what's happening, and they're going, okay, we really need to get ahead of this. So right now, textiles is the biggest thing, and that's coming. Quickly on its heels is going to be detergents, right? And so those are all center of store things, right?
So this is we I think naturally we concentrate on food and beverage, FMCG world, CPG world in your American way, Steve. But we think about food and beverage. What you've just said there, it's beyond. Well, potentially it's going beyond that.
When was the last time you saw a product that came with a big paper manual? I used to expect, you'd open something up and you'd have a huge manual. Now, if you're lucky, you get, I've had products for a few years now where there's just a QR code. Now, in future, you're going to be able to scan the QR code that's on the product or on the box, and it'll give you that information. And I think in the future, it's going to be even easier. You're just going to scan it, and it'll take you to that. And not only that, not only will you get it in your own language, but if you're in a different country or something, you'll be able to get it in a different language. And I think it's just that this is modernizing that whole kind of interaction between people and products.
I mean, this sounds totally utopian now. It seems like the perfect way of going things. Obviously, we're getting to the end of this podcast. I just want to ask some difficult questions for you, Steve. If QR and 2D codes are really powerful, why hasn't it happened before now? What have been the big drivers of why it's not happened?
So Lee noted it, that QR codes and data matrices, they came in the early 2000s, right? But at the end of the day, to get the technology there, it usually takes 20 years. It almost doesn't matter. It's kind of this.
Is that a typical life cycle?
Yeah. So something invented 20 years later, people are using it, right? So it's not uncommon for it to take this long, because everything kind of has to start landing in place, right? So when it came out, yes, there were imaging scanners, but they weren't really good. They weren't high resolution. They couldn't go really fast. That all changes, and so the scanners start getting replaced. The ability of the scanners get there. The next side of it is the additional data that it brings. Can the systems ingest and manage that data and use it to happen? And so that happened a lot earlier. But now it's being now that additional data that can come from the barcode is now available to them. So now it's really helping to close the loop. So the ability to access the data, and then on the other side, it is the smartphones, right? So our kids, it's always been something they could use, right? And among that, we had this huge moment in our history called COVID. And that moment really changed everything, because we moved into a touchless environment. And so the QR code became a norm for us. And it didn't matter what age you were, because if I wanted to order a meal at a restaurant, I had to scan the QR code.
Well,
right?
but isn't that down to the evolving technology that's happened? Because probably, when you're talking 20 years ago, we didn't have the technology to support that kind of change. Is that right?
Yeah. It's all the progress. It's all the little steps that all come together, and now we're at that place. And again, that's kind of why we did that initial survey, to figure out, where will we be at 2027, right? So that all comes together, saying that, okay, the printing technologies, the scanning technologies that might be on the line and in supply chain, the ability of what the phone can do and serve up the data, the infrastructures to be able to have those websites with the additional information. all of that has come together now. And so now we're in a different time where all those things can be unlocked. But until each one of those little pieces got in place, you couldn't unlock. Yeah, and it'll be the just the norm, like scanning the E and UPC at the point of sale. It just works, right? And that's where we'll be. It'll just work, and people will just expect to be able to scan it and be able to get to that additional data, as opposed to today, which is scan it and take it to a site. Now that QR code will be scanned, and it's multi-purpose, right? It works for supply chain, for retail, for the consumer, and for the regulators. So,
and the fantastic thing that GS1 bring to this is the data that's in the barcode is standardized, which means that people only have to write one way of interpreting things.
Right.
So the expiry date's always the same way, and and therefore every app can read it and interpret it the same way. Whereas you don't even get that on products, do you? The date code's a bit different.
So I know there's going to be manufacturers listening to this. I know they do. Some have reached out to me. They're now thinking, right, we probably need to start looking at this.
Mm-hmm.
What are the three takeaways that really you would suggest that they consider?
For me, you really need to get started. Today, you know that retail and the successes and the ability that unlocks for retail, but what can the 2D barcode unlock for the manufacturer? So take time, understand what use cases you want to go after, start small. Make sure you start small, but also, as I said before, you have to think about who should be the stakeholders that you bring together. Right? Are there solution providers or independent people that you want to bring in to help you, have that conversation so that you can build out your production line and build out how you're going to do it, so that you are successful with the first one. But again, start small, understand the use case you're going to look for, and there's a lot of things to consider. So really, it's important to have all the stakeholders with you. So I guess the things are: get started, start small, right? Start with a small use case, and make sure that you involve the stakeholders, and that way you'll be successful.
Thanks, Stephen.
Oh, thank you,
Brilliant.
guys. It was nice to be with you.
So just quickly, Lee, just final takeaways on this. From a production line side, what would you add? But Steve's obviously mentioned a lot of things there. What would you add, and just final takeaway on it, really?
I think once you're clear about the use case you're wanting to run, is this variable data or is this fixed data? Then you need to sit down with all the stakeholders around that, pack design, marketing, and so on, and put in place a project plan about how you're going to do it. And that's going to involve, for every individual, this is not a one size fits all. One of the challenges with adding barcodes onto products is every production line, as well as every product, needs thinking about. That's not to say that everyone will end up being different, but you need to have a process of examining what you need. And this isn't just about printing. This is also about, where does the data come from? How do you get the pack right in order to have space? How do you make sure that everyone's good? Because the last thing that any of us want to do is slow down the production line, cause a yield problem in a production line, or if you're a production manager, mean you can't hit your deadlines every day. So this is about a change management process on the shop floor. It's nothing scary, but it just has to be managed that way as a process.
And I think, really, Lee, what you've said, and you Steve mentioned, it's really, you mentioned it before. Don't panic, but don't ignore it. I think that's the key thing.
Yeah, there's other resources too. So GS1 with the solution provider have created these things called playbooks. And so there's a scanner playbook, there's a printing and creation scan book, there's a scan book for a playbook for systems. We also have the GS1 2D and retail implementation guide. Now that's a really big guide, so don't be afraid of it. But it's written by that mission specific work group that I talked about at the beginning, and it's written in 3 different voices. And the first voice is a retailer, next voice is the brand, and the last voice is the solution provider. So it talks to them in those voices. So
Brilliant. Steve, wrapping it up,
Mhm.
thank you so much for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I think it's really helped join the dots from episode 1, especially around what Sunrise 2027 actually means and what does it mean, and obviously where manufacturers start.
Mhm.
Lee, any closing comments from yourself? Obviously, great discussion as always.
Don't panic. Get started. It's simple. It's not as difficult as it looks from a distance.
This has been Only a Best Before Date. This is our discussion around coding, barcodes, you name it. We'll see you again in the next episode. Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Lee.
All right, take care.
Thanks, Gary. Thanks, Steve. Bye-bye.